The Dark World archetype was introduced into the TCG on November 16th, 2005 with the release of the core set Elemental Energy. The archetype received waves of support in the following years, with the most recent support releasing last year from the core set Phantom Rage. At the time of Dark World's introduction into the TCG, the archetype was revolutionary, with the goal of the archetype revolving around discarding Dark World monsters from your hand to the graveyard to activate various effects that would give you the upper hand throughout the duel, as well as a select few monsters gaining additional effects if the monster is discarded to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect. In this first video of a new series called The History of, I will be taking you through the various releases of the Dark World archetype, starting from the earliest releases all the way to the most recent wave of support, as well as giving my thoughts and opinions on the releases and support given to us throughout the years. Future episodes will go over other various archetypes, covering one per episode. I hope you enjoy the video, and if you do, please consider subscribing, and let me know if there are any other archetypes that you personally would like to see covered in future episodes. Let's go ahead and get started. Starting things off with the releases from Elemental Energy, we have Zur, Knight of Dark World, a vanilla level 4 Dark Fiend monster with 1800 attack and 1500 defense who was released as a common in the set and whose flavor text reads, "The name of this illustrious knight is known by all residents of Dark World. He never oppresses the commoners." There's nothing too notable to say about Zur, seeing as how he is a vanilla monster with no effect. I imagine that early builds of Dark World would run Zur because of the relatively high attack for a level 4, and with it being more accessible with the searchability of Scar, Scout of Dark World. Although these days Zur is not run in any modern Dark World strategy. And speaking of which, up next is Scar, Scout of Dark World. Scar is a level 2 Dark Fiend effect monster with 500 attack and 500 defense, was released as a common in the set and whose effect reads, when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, add one level 4 or lower Dark World monster from your deck to your hand. At the time of the release of Elemental Energy, Scar was the only in-archetype searcher for Dark World monsters, but came with the restriction of only being able to search level 4 or lower monsters. So that meant that you would need to naturally draw your higher level Dark World monsters or find another way to quickly access your key level 5 or higher monsters within the archetype. These days, Scar is obsolete due to better in-archetype searchers. Moving right along, we have the first monster that takes advantage of the discarding effect of Dark World monsters. Beige, Vanguard of Dark World, is a level 4 Dark Fiend effect monster with 1600 attack and 1300 defense and was released as a common within the set. Beige has a simple effect that reads, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, special summon it from the graveyard. This effect allows for easy swarming and is a must-have in any strategy involving Dark World monsters because, really, how can you say no to a free special summon? 5 out of 5, definitely play 2 or 3 depending on how you feel. Next up is one of the best monsters within the archetype, Brau, Huntsman of Dark World. Brau is a level 3 Dark Fiend effect monster with 1400 attack and 800 defense. Released as both a rare and an ultimate rare in Elemental Energy, Brau's effect reads, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, draw one card plus another card if this card was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect. I can't imagine any Dark World deck that runs any less than 3. The draw power that Brau provides you is too good to pass up on. Next from Elemental Energy, we have Braun, Mad King of Dark World. Braun is another level 4 Dark Fiend effect monster that was released as a rare as well as an ultimate rare, has 1800 attack and 400 defense, and has the following effect where, when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can discard one card. Braun is more or less a better version of Zur, whereas they both have a nice base 1800 attack. Braun has the effect to allow you to gain more discard effects if you're able to deal battle damage with him. But even with that in mind, Braun is not currently run in any modern strategy of Dark World. Nearing the end of the monsters released from the first set, we have Sylva, Warlord of Dark World. Sylva is a level 5 Dark Fiend effect monster with 2300 attack and 1400 defense that was released as a rare as well as an ultimate rare, and whose effect reads, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, special summon it from the graveyard, then, if it was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, your opponent returns exactly 2 cards from their hand to the bottom of their deck in any order. Sylva is by far one of the best cards within the archetype, sharing the same special summoning effect as Beige, as well as taking advantage of a secondary discard effect to make your opponent return the 2 cards from their hand to the deck. Sylva is still a good choice to run a copy of in modern Dark World decks for the secondary effect alone, now that there are easier ways to trigger that effect specifically. And finally, rounding out the monsters released from Elemental Energy, we have the quote-unquote other half of Sylva, Gold, Warlord of Dark World. Gold is another level 5 Dark Fiend effect monster that shares similar base attack and defense as Silva with 2300 and 1400 respectively. Gold was released as a super rare as well as an ultimate rare within the set and has the following effect. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, if it was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can target up to 2 cards your opponent controls, special summon this card from the graveyard, then destroy those targets if any. Gold is in the same boat with Silva, where if you're going to run a copy of Gold, you really only need to run one. It shares the same special summoning effect and has a nasty destruction effect if you're able to discard it by an opponent's card effect. Definitely a good choice to run. Moving on to the spells and the last 2 Dark World cards released from Elemental Energy, we have Dark World Lightning. Dark World Lightning is a normal spell card that was released as a common and has the following effect. Target one set card on the field, destroy that target, then discard 1 card. These days, this card isn't seen in any modern deck, but when it was released, Dark World Lightning was a great in-archetype way to get rid of your opponent's set back row, as well as at the same time triggering the discard effects of your Dark World monsters. It's a cool concept for a card, but these days there are other more useful options. Last but not least, from Elemental Energy, we have Gateway to Dark World, a quick play spell card that was released as a common and has the effect, target one Dark World monster in your graveyard, special summon that target. You cannot summon other monsters the turn that you activate this card, but you can set. With this card having the restriction of limiting you to not being able to summon other monsters the turn you activate this card, you will 99% of the time be activating this card on your opponent's turn, seeing how it is a quick play spell card. This card sees minimal play these days, if any, but may come in handy if you're in a pinch and about to be attacked for game. That wraps up the releases from Elemental Energy, and with that said, we'll jump straight into the next set that Dark World support was released from, and that set being Strike of Neos. Strike of Neos was released into the TCG on February 28th, 2007, and gave us 4 new Dark World cards, one of them being the most important pieces of support that still gets used in Dark World strategies to this day. To start things off from Strike of Neos, we have Rainbow, Overlord of Dark World. This is a level 7 Dark Fiend effect monster with 2500 attack and 1800 defense, was released as an ultra rare as well as an ultimate rare, and has the following effect. If this card is discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, special summon this card from the graveyard. When this card is special summoned this way, destroy all monsters your opponent controls or all spell and traps they control. Rainbow is somewhat unique in the way that up until this point, we had never had a Dark World monster that only had its discard effects triggered by the opponent's discard effects. These days, Rainbow is not played in modern decks, but is still a very unique card. The next monster we have from this set is Kaki, Gorilla of Dark World, a level 2 Dark Fiend effect monster with 300 attack and 500 defense, was released as a common within the set and has the effect that, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, target one monster on the field, destroy that target. Kaki has good opportunities for spot removal, but these days there are better alternatives for this kind of spot removal that allow you to further your plays much better than Kaki can. Moving along, the second to last Dark World card that was released in Strike of Neos, we have Gren, Tactician of Dark World. A level 2 Dark Fiend effect monster with 300 attack and 500 defense, was released as a common within the set and who has the opposite effect of Kaki that, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, target one spell or trap on the field, destroy that target. Gren is also very similar to Kaki in the way that there are other much better alternatives that you can play that give you the same effect but furthers your Dark World strategies better than either Gren or Kaki can. Now getting into the last and by far the best piece of Dark World support that was released in Strike of Neos, we have Dark World Dealings, a normal spell card that was released as a super rare as well as an ultimate rare and has a simple effect that reads each player draws one card, then each player discards one card. This card is insanely good in Dark World decks for being able to draw through your deck while at the same time being able to trigger your Dark World of monsters effects by discarding. There's no real downside to this card and you always want to be playing 3 copies of this in any strategy that involves Dark World cards or really any strategy that involves discarding. The next set that had any Dark World support would come out on August 15th, 2007 in the form of Tactical Evolution, but would only include one lackluster vanilla level 4 Dark Fiend effect monster with 100 attack and 2100 defense, was released as a common in the set, and that monster is Renge, Gatekeeper of Dark World, with its flavor text reading, his renowned athletic physique has made him famous with the populace of Dark World. They call him Iron Wall Renge because no one can break through his incredible defenses. Not a whole lot needs to be said here. Renge doesn't have any effect that actively helps Dark World decks, other than his apparent renowned athletic physique that made him famous. Just look at those legs. Similar to the last wave of support in Tactical Evolution, when Phantom Darkness came around on February 13th, 2008, it introduced another lackluster piece of Dark World support that came in the form of Dark World Grimoire, a continuous spell card that reads, during your end phase, if you discarded a monster to the graveyard because you had more cards in your hand than the size limit, you can target one of those monsters, special summon that card. Dark World Grimoire is just way too slow and conditional to reliably run in any Dark World strategy. With that being said, it would be close to 4 years until Dark World would receive any new support. Fortunately, on October 18th, 2011, the Gates of the Underworld structure deck would be released, reprinting all of the previously released Dark World cards, as well as introducing 4 new Dark World cards that would give the archetype an insane power and consistency boost. To quickly recap, the reprinted Dark World cards included Zur, Renge, Scar, Khaki, Gren, Brow, Beige, Brawn, Silva, Gold, Rainbow, Dark World Lightning, Gateway to Dark World, and Dark World Dealings. The structure deck release would also include valuable reprints of Allure of Darkness and Card Destruction, which are must-haves in any Dark World deck. There would be 4 new Dark World cards released within the Gates of the Underworld structure deck that would all be mainstays within the archetype. Starting things off with the now face of the archetype, we have Grapha, Dragonlord of Dark World, a level 8 Dark Fiend effect monster with 2700 attack and 1800 defense, was released as an ultra rare and has the following effect. You can special summon this card from your graveyard by returning 1 Dark World monster you control to the hand, except Grapha, Dragonlord of Dark World. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, target 1 card your opponent controls, destroy that target. Then, if this card was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, look at 1 random card in your opponent's hand. Then, if it was a monster, you can special summon it to your field. Needless to say that Grapha is a must-have in Dark World decks, and like I said earlier, is the face of the archetype. The spot removal effect is very useful for how easy it is to trigger, and is also easy to summon, with just needing to have any Dark World monster on the field. The secondary effect of Grapha doesn't come up very often, and is luck-based, but if you're able to hit a monster in your opponent's hand, you can generate yourself some advantage. Also, the artwork is just really, really cool. The next monster that we have from the structure deck is Snow, Unlight of Dark World, a level 4 Dark Fiend effect monster with 1700 attack and 0 defense, was released as a super rare and has the effect that reads, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, if it was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, add 1 Dark World card from your deck to the hand, then special summon that target, if any, in face-up defense position. Snow, while having kind of a weird card reading, would take Scar's place as the searcher of the archetype, being able to search any Dark World card instead of just a level 4 or lower monsters as previously only being able to do with Scar. The secondary effect of Snow would also allow you to be able to special summon a monster in your opponent's graveyard, which is also really good, being able to generate more advantage for yourself. Overall, Snow would just be an amazing addition to the archetype and is still used to this day. The last monster that came out of the structure deck would be Ceruli, Guru of Dark World. Ceruli is a level 1 Dark Fiend effect monster with 100 attack and 300 defense. This card was released as a super rare within the deck and has the following effect. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, special summon this card from the graveyard to your opponent's side of the field in face-up defense position. When this card is special summoned by the effect of a Dark World card, your opponent must discard 1 card. Cerulea's effect is very straightforward and is a very easy way to trigger your Dark World monster's secondary discard effects. The number of this card that is run is debated, but is still a very good monster to include in a Dark World deck. The last new piece of support that would come out of the Gates of the Underworld structure deck would be the aptly named The Gates of Dark World, a field spell released as an ultra rare that reads, all Fiend type monsters gain 300 attack and defense. Once per turn, you can banish 1 Fiend-type monster from your graveyard, discard 1 Fiend-type monster, then draw 1 card. Along with the attack and defense boost that this card gives your Dark World monsters, Gates allows you to simultaneously cycle through your deck as well as discard and trigger your Dark World monsters' effects, which can allow you to gain a multitude of advantages if used correctly. On top of that, this card is not a hard once per turn, which means that if you're able to, you can activate multiple copies of Gates of the Underworld and gain even more advantage and activate even more of your Dark World cards during the course of a single turn. For that reason, you should always run 3. That wraps up all of the new releases from the Gates of the Underworld structure deck, but more Dark World support would be right around the corner because less than a month after the Gates of the Underworld structure deck was released, we would receive another wave of Dark World support coming out of the core set Photon Shockwave, releasing on November 15th, 2011. The support that Dark World got from the core set was unfortunately not the best, but was an interesting monster with a discard effect that would soon be completely forgotten. The monster in question ended up being Latinum, Exarch of Dark World, a level 6 Dark Fiend effect monster with 1500 attack and 2400 defense that was released as an ultra rare as well as an ultimate rare in the set and has the following effect. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, if it was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, target one fiend-type monster on the field, special summon this card from the graveyard, then that target, if any, gains 500 attack. Latinum puts a unique spin on the special summon when discarded effects with the additional attack boost, but the base stats as well as the level would prevent it from being an active addition to Dark World decks. Unfortunately, after Photon Shockwave, there would be about a 2.5-year gap between Latinum and the next wave of Dark World support, but eventually would come in the core set Primal Origin, released on May 16th, 2014. The new Dark World support would end up being Lucent, Netherlord of Dark World, a level 6 Dark Fiend effect monster with 2400 attack and 0 defense, and was released as a super rare within the set. Lucent has an effect that reads, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, special summon it from the graveyard. Then, if this card was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon one Fiend-type monster from your deck to either side of the field. Lucent would be a rather nice breath of fresh air, as when it came to Dark World support released from core sets, the last couple of waves would be rather lackluster. However, Lucent would have an easy way to summon itself with its own effect, as well as having the secondary effect letting you special summon any fiend monster in your deck, allowing you to extend into other plays and generate even more advantage. Overall, a very welcome piece of support that you may want to consider running a copy or two of in your own deck. Jumping forward almost 3.5 years into the future, we land at the core set Code of the Duelist, released on August 4th, 2017, which has our next piece of Dark World support. That support being a continuous trap card known as Dark World Brainwashing. Dark World Brainwashing would be released as a common in the set and reads, when an opponent's monster activates its effect, if you have 3 or more cards in your hand, except during the damage step, you can target one Dark World monster on your field, return it to the hand, and if you do, the activated effect becomes discard one random card from your opponent's hand. While the overall effect of this card is good for what it is, Dark World Brainwashing wouldn't find its way into any Dark World decks, as maintaining a constant 3 or more cards in your hand would prove to be rather challenging and not a productive addition to decks at that time or even now. The last and most recent piece of Dark World support that we would receive would come over 3 years later in the core set Phantom Rage, released on November 6th, 2020. This support would be Charge into a Dark World, a normal spell card that was released as a common and reads as follows. Target one level 4 or lower fiend monster in your graveyard, special summon it, then discard one fiend monster. You can only activate one Charge into a Dark World per turn. Charge into a Dark World would end up being a decent support card, allowing to gain field presence as well as discarding any fiend monster. There would be a couple things holding this card back from being really good, however. Firstly, being the restriction to level 4 or lower monsters in the graveyard, as well as this card being a hard once per turn, severely limiting the potential of this card. With that being said though, it's still a good card that you can run in your deck to help trigger your discard effects of other Dark World monsters. And with that, that brings us up to date with the Dark World archetype. But before we end things off, I do want to mention a couple cards that aren't technically Dark World cards by name, but have either effects pertaining to Dark World or cards that have artwork of Dark World monsters on them. These cards are Dark Deal, which includes Zur, Knight of Dark World, Dark Scheme, which involves Silva, Warlord of Dark World, the Forces of Darkness, which includes what I think is Scar, Scout of Dark World, and Brow, Huntsman of Dark World in the artwork and has an effect directly pertaining to Dark World monsters, and Dark Smog, which includes Grapha, Dragon Lord of Dark World. That was all of the cards that I could find like this, but if you know of any others that I missed, please let me know. With all of that wrapped up, that brings us to the end of this episode of the history of, this episode being the history of the Dark World archetype. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is a project that has been in the works for a really long time, and I'm excited that I was able to finally finish it up and get it put out. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like as well as subscribing. It may be cliche, but it really does help me out a lot. Let me know of what you think of videos like these, and like I said at the beginning of the video, if there are any archetypes that you would like to see covered in the future, please let me know down in the comments. Take care everybody, have a great day.